from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. The title of our episode, The State of Podcasting / Internet Radio 2017. Podcasting is a very popular format days. It is an advertising format at best. And let me just check something here on our sound. Okay. Anyway, nonetheless, this broadcast was brought about by a number of changes here. We have some numbers to give you in a minute, but the merger between the Blog Talk concession, radio concession, and Spreaker. We are on Spreaker. We like Spreaker's console, very professional console that reminds one of actual radio. And the sound there, as my friend H would say, is the best, no doubt about it. Now, the combination here would be roughly about 50,000 different podcasts. There are millions of podcasts out there. Some reside at the iTunes area, but at iTunes, one of the things I've discovered, you are one in a few million there, and of course, there are people that self-host their podcasts on various sites, and they're at places like Libsyn, etc. across the thing, or you can build your own. We talked about it on our technical program, a Linux radio station. That can be done. There's very several ways of doing it also, that you can create a show with the necessary sounds, etc. there. The Random Bytes radio show, we got the inspiration here. We're appreciative of Mr. Wayne for putting it out to the public there. And we'll put a link to his show out of our appreciation for some of the materials that he provided on the merger. What will it look like? Well, we don't know at this time. But what we do know, there's just not enough resources out there to have the two. Blog Talk Radio, no doubt, was a weaker partner, whereas Spreaker was the people on the move. Now, Mr. Wayne criticizes what he calls the talk aspect there, where callers are. That's a popular type of a venue. It can be done several different ways. They use a Spreaker and the Blog Talk platform there that Blog Talk uses, and how Alan came up with the concept to allow at the time his dying father to communicate with various family members, and he copyrighted that particular situation. It can be done other ways also of having multiple that we did not have at the time, virtual phone technology, voice over IP, etc. You can have virtual phone lines, and that will take care of the callers in to you. The commercial enterprise, Real Networks, at one time had an open source project. I almost found the name here, just was on the tip of my tongue. Now it's disappeared away, but nonetheless, it was there, and we participated in it. And at the same time, we got the code for it, and I almost getting this. Anyway, they based their platform on it, and of course, Real Networks has pretty much disappeared from the state of things. I'm not certain if they're even there at all now. What had happened was they bought out a platform by none other than Mark Cuban of the Dallas Mavericks fame. And Mark brought it in. He brought together all these actual radio stations and started streaming them on the internet, which is a very important thing. His network, it was a very large network. He sold it to Real, and that put him in the multi-millionaire class from selling that. one of the problems he ran into was the commercial aspect. Commercials on the various radio stations and TV stations were being played, and the old American stumbling block to progress called copyrights came in, and that caused some problems. But there were other people that took it up. We became associated with the late Jerry Pippin, the king of internet radio, and he was streaming from a local station in Oklahoma live. And the radio show that he was live, and that was internet radio. And people could call in, etc., use a radio station as a basis. Now we have, like WBRN, internet-only radio stations are a different animal, but it doesn't really matter that much. As Mr. Wayne says, we're in the mix with iHeart, and iHeart has radio stations all over the continental U.S., the Americas, and the world. Now, it is a very large network, and originally when we started out there through Spreaker, we were appreciative of them, they were just called shows. Now they have moved to this commercial thing called podcast. But does it really matter? In actuality, it does not, because effectively what you're doing is, if you don't get hung up on the semantics, and we're not going to quibble here, but radio is radio, because what radio is doing now, they have moved to satellite. Dr. Al Sharpton, national leader, is on there, and numerous others are on the various satellite Sirius and various others. So you have channels there that provide a space for various quote-unquote radio commentators that are there, pundits, etc. And on the iHearts of the world and various other places, you will find broadcasts, as they call it, podcasts from CBS News, NPR, etc. Now, it's interesting here how that will affect things. For those of us who were around Blog Talk, we remembered when the national disgrace Tabitha Smiley came to Blog Talk and sucked up all the air of these unknown broadcasters. And, of course, he brought in thousands of listeners from his NPR days, no doubt. But he disappeared from there, and, of course, Blog Talk was left with what was left. And one of the big pitfalls in podcasting, internet radio, is the amount of time that goes into these broadcasts on a consistent basis. Now, even the larger ones, the CBSs of the world, etc., they'll do 2 to 5 minute podcasts, and some of the others will not keep timely podcasts up. Mr. Wayne and his Random Bites, I think he's daily listed on Spreaker as a comedy broadcast, a little bit different, but he was serious here, talking about this merger. We found out about the merger from the Podcasters Movement site on Facebook, and the broadcaster out of Detroit, Monica Williams, was featured there at the podcast movement's recent conclave in Los Angeles. So that was in. Well, nonetheless, this answers one of the questions, how the merger will come out. What about the cost? Well, cost does change, but it's going to take a while to work this out. They are working on things like monetization. Spreaker already allows one to put commercials within their broadcast. Blog Talk does that for you, whether you like it or not. And so it's in there if you're in the monetization program. We're not in those, but the whole thing is that that is one of the aspects out there, and you have a cottage industry of people that will give you the necessary materials, teach you how to podcast, etc. There, if you go to the Podcasters Roundtable, you'll find many of those people there. That do that as a profession and been doing it for a number of years there, and several others. I think one has the podcasters, I forget what it's called right now, but he hosts the Audacity to podcast. If you go to his site, very helpful instructions on how to do a number of things in internet radio if you want to get into it. The whole monetization format is, to remember one thing there, you're not going to make $1 million unless you have a million-seller book. Like The Art of the Deal or something of that nature, you do it, or if you're offering coaching, all kinds of self-help schemes, you will be able to monetize that. Or if you're an interview show like my friend H has there, is based upon not only your interviewing skills, but also upon which authors you have there, or if you're reviewing movies, etc., whom you have on your particular cast, or the title of movies, the producers involved, a lot of time involved in those kinds of situations to get the podcast out there. Now, in our particular situation, we're in the political podcasting arena, and we sometimes do the talk show format, but more or less we inform. And we recycle news items, comment on it, use various statistics, use our own models to predict where we are going. We'll get to Edison here in a minute, and where they plan to go, the whole movement of podcasting, excuse me, as I introduce this. But you will see more mergers out here involved. Now, if you look at, while we're here, the Google Play and the iTunes and the mobile unit, you can go there and get a listing of shows. But the problem when you start dealing with millions of those is a little bit different. Now, Sonar is another platform we're on. There's a number of them there. Stitcher is also out there. SoundCloud to a certain extent, but SoundCloud is more of a what you'd call a music type format. They have something there for podcasters. Very, very limited. I think you can have 2 shows at once, and if you pay, I believe you can have 4 at once. It's really not set up to do that. But there are other hosting sites that are around. Libsyn, it comes to mine there. My the podcaster producer par excellence out in Hawaii there with Blueberry. Very good site that involves him and on his particular situation there. So those are some that come to site. We'll try to put some links at least on the iTunes, the iHeart and Spreaker concession here to this, and to a certain extent on Blog Talk if we have them ready. Anyway, let's go to the facts. This is from Edison Research. They're the one who do the exit polls for the networks. This is in January, February 2017, conducted a national phone survey of 2,000 people aged 12 and over, randomly digit dialing techniques. Interviews 51% with landlines, 49% with mobile phones in both English and Espanol. Data weighted to 12 plus population figures. The series had been covering a wide range of digital media since 1998. And this is Trimatron here. Estimated millions of people familiar with the term of podcasting in 2006, 22%. And if we go to 2008, during the election of Barack Obama, then a senator from Illinois, and the Hillary Rodham Clinton, a senator from New York, 37%, so it did grow some. And in 2014, another election year, 48% of the people were familiar with the term podcasting. So we move, as they say, merrily along here, and to 2017. Well, if we go back to 2016, 55%, and now 60% in 2017, estimated to be 168 million. And more here, percentage of listen to podcasts. This is ever listened to podcasts in 2000. 17, 40%. We had 11%. We'll go to 2008. Was 18%. 2012, because these are election years for us. 2013. Now, since we went more into the internet radio thing, we don't have that. But percentage listened to podcasts in last month, 9% in 2008, 14% in 2012. We're up to 24% now that listen to these specific things. Now, by gender, an interesting measurement here, 56% are men, 44% are women. Whoops. Got to go back here. Missed a couple of my slides. Now, we look at age groups here. 12 to 24, 27% this year. We'll just do this year. And from 25 to 54, a lot of those people we get, the millenniums come flying in, 31%, and 55 plus, 12%, and we go back to the beginning, 7%. Hasn't been a lot of growth in the 55 plus market, but in the 25 to 54% is what advertisers love, and from 16 to 31% are there, and they listen last month. Household incomes, this is 18 and older, 35%, and we'll look at the 75 to 100K, 13% there. In the monthly, 14%. If you get 100K to 150K, 15%. That we assume is this year from Edison. And of the 18 plus, 10% of those, if we go to 150,000 and more. So fairly affluent. Education, 15%. Let's see the color coding here. The U.S. population, 27%, 18 plus. With high school or less, 15%. With high school or less, 2 years of college, something that comes into many surveys these days. 32% of the U.S. population, 27%. Monthly 4-year college, 27% monthly, and the U.S. population 19%. So actually what it's saying, people with the standard 4-year college degrees less are there. With graduate school, 22% in the U.S. and 30% advanced degrees. Employment. Full-time employment, listen, monthly 63%, 49% of the U.S. Population. Employed part-time, 11% of the U.S. population, 12% there. Temporary or unemployed, 5%, 3%, very low. Homemakers, 5%. Retirees, 8% monthly, and 21% of the U.S. population. Students, 6 and 6. Not a lot of students, evidently, according to this one. Weekly podcast listings, 2013, 7%. And 2017, up to 15%. Not much going on there. And how long they listen, 5 hours. That's the mean. So we look at that. Hour to less than 3 hours, 36%. 3 hours to less than 5 hours, 22%. That's probably the statistic you want to bring out there. And we learn a little. The average of 5 podcasts listened per week. 2 about 24%, 3 about 17%, 4 5 20%. Suppose it's addictive. Click on podcasts and listen immediately, 77%. Downloads are usually less, but we're in an archive business, so it's 41% there. Number of subscriptions, the average of 6 podcasts subscribed to. The largest percentage here is 6 to 10, 24%. 4 to 5, 20%. Device is very important here. In 2013, 58% were on computers, and now 42% are on smartphones, mobile devices, etc. In 2017, 69% are on these smartphones. 31% are on computer this year. 31%. In 2016, 29% were on computer and 71% on mobile. We see that in our own figures also. Monthly podcasters, 31% are on computer, and podcast subscribers, 19% are on computer, 81% are on mobiles, and 69% there. So that's changed a lot of things. Monetizing mobile is much more difficult. Ever listened to a podcast 5 years or more, 16%. Less than 6 months, 19% there. Monthly podcast consumers, 20%, 5 years or more. Weekly, 21%, and podcast subscribers, 25%. Where people listen? At home, 84%. In the car, 65%. On foot and walking, 42%. At work, 39%. At the gym, we listen there. 29%, and riding on the T, known as public transportation, 29% there also. At work, 14%. At home, anyway, we went through that, mostly at home. And monthly podcasts, who download, well, 76 to 100%, 55% there. That's not going to really tell us very much there. Public radio podcast listening. Ever listen to a podcast? 38%. Monthly podcast consumers, 44%. Weekly podcast consumers, 43%. This is on public radio, and subscribers at 55%. A lot of podcast people over there. Brand usage, any social media brand, 81%, and this 94% for the monthly types. Facebook, 73% here, and for the U.S. population as a whole, 67%. Instagram, 34%, and 48% for monthly. Chat Snap, I'm not sure about that. 39% monthly and 30% there. Twitter, for the U.S. population, 23%. We're on Twitter. We like Twitter. Twitter's our favorite form. DJ Trump is there too. 41% for the monthly, and LinkedIn. And we put our economics broadcast there. Numbers, man. 39% and 22% for national. WhatsApp at 13% and 16%, very low there. Tumblr 88% and 12%. And I don't know about this music, whatever here. Frequency here, U.S. population at least 7 times a day. 50. Wait a minute here. 50% less often than several times a day. 48%. That's of the U.S. population, and at least several times a day, 64%. This is the monthly consumer. Less than that, 36%. Do you follow any companies or brand on social media? Yes, 31%. No. So it's more willy-nilly. This is of the U.S. population. The monthly is about the same, 52% no, yes. So the whole idea of branding, we don't know. Netflix as a nation as a whole, 50%, monthly 57%, Amazon Prime 29%, and 49% on monthly podcasts. Hello, 14 and 24 respectively. Subscribe to any of the above. U.S. population 58 and that. Use on-demand video services, Netflix 45% and 60% Prime And we won't go much into that. Alex, this is a new smart speaker awareness of the nation as a whole. 57%, kind of doubt that, and 75 for the Google Home, 45 and 62. And aware of either Alex or Google Home, 80% or 63%. But the smart speaker ownership is very low. Alex, U.S. population, the whole 5%, 9%. Monthly podcast subscribers, Google Home 2 and 2. So you're not going to, as they say, mind goal with any of those technologies. Share of survey the methodology. 8,631 respondents completed 24-hour audio listening. National sample 13 plus online, and how it was offered in Espanol, etc. And let me just a minute here. Okay, get to the last slide. We finally got through this. Thought we'd do the numbers. Audio, AM, FM, own music, streaming, Sirius, we talked about that earlier, and locations, mobile, car, lorry, whatever, content, etc. Share of ear here, over 8,000 one day, share of ear, 4 hours on the average. AM, FM radio, 54% owned, 15%. Streaming audio, 15%. Sirius, 7%. Music channel, 5%. Podcasters have 2%. The share of ear and others. You can see FM radio still in, but FM radio, by and large, is in cars. One of the things has to happen here, and some of the podcasts are becoming available that you can get in the car because of the new systems that you have. Podcast listen, share of the ear. FM radio is a source there, 25%, 4% of it. Podcasters get 30% there, and streaming is coming. You can get that. You can get Sirius in the car too. Audio listening by device, radio receiver, 50%, and mobile devices. Now this is where we come in, 19% there, Sirius receiver, 6%. You don't get as many. The CD player is about dead. Internet connections, that's coming. 30% listen to audio on a smartphone in a day. We recognize that. So we all have to be more diligent in our attention to smartphones. Now, Apple Play, I'm not certain. That's the Apple OS. I have looked at that before. A lot of our people are Android. But we have some there. Podcasting continues to rise with monthly listeners growing at 12 to 24% over year. Audience continues to be predominantly, we'll say 20, they say 18 to 54, leans slightly male. That will probably change as more and more people are in the smartphone technology, I would say, no doubt. In the summary here, clicking on the podcast to listen immediately, either streaming or via progressive downloads is a dominant paradigm for listening. 27% do subscribe. Now that's the RSS feed. We use those. More, I think, computer type use the RSS feed, but they go also to places that shows are featured on. While home continues to be the location listening devices, the vehicle is stronger now. That will become much stronger. We have self-driving cars that people will have more leisure within a few years to listen to these. And, of course, also they can look at video now. We didn't talk about YouTube here. YouTube is there. We're over there in audio-only format, but YouTube is very popular across there. And the Facebook communications, kind of interesting there. So in other words, everything is changing. We looked at several things here and summarized the whole thing at up to about 54%. They tend to dominate. This was called a Podcasters Consumer 2007. We'll put this on here. We went through it, and the reason we did it was that we wanted to get it done, period. And on the PR web where we first seen this, Francisco Baccineri, he will be the CEO, and this is what the gentleman there at the Random Bytes was saying. So basically what that means is that they will use Certex. We talked about this before, the big data audience solution. Now, these things will improve over time, no doubt about it. And as they improve over time, we'll have better matrix out here and a better delivery service. Specifically, we see the various radio networks. Sinclair is into this, iHeart, as they offer more podcast shows, etc. To people. And as they are also, iHeart has a nice mobile application. We use it. And this is how we get the shows. Senos, we are on it also. It's a viable network out there. Is one of the using the speakers there. And on Twitter, and more, as they say, at Spreaker, you can get them, and we're just looking over here at their speakers and how it comes over. We get people from there, and the various ones that they have. They also have a TV set up also. So, in other words, you can find them going and coming there where they are. The connection there. Founded in 2002. Yeah, I guess if we look at Wikipedia here, Senos is an American consumer electronics company. And in 2004, they were at the Consumer Electronics Show. Official Soho, located as well as it owns local studios, etc., etc. Anyway, they've been around for a while. John McFarlane and etc. founded the company, and they have Amazon Player compatible. They added that and various other things. The Sonos Studio, Studio Player. Various things they've added through the years. Apple Music became available for streaming there also. Some of the things that they put out there with, they have their own smart speakers out there, resellers and etc. So that is part of that mix. Let's do the baseball scores. Couldn't do podcast moving without the baseball scores. Baseball scores. The podcast, incidentally, and internet radio is bigger. On the downside, you have millions of people out there. Most of them are not as well known, but they are nonetheless there. A lot of good information given out, no doubt, and also the ability of to appear on iHeart is now with Spreaker. It's almost instantaneously. You can appear there. Actually, you could be there 24/7 if you wish. But the situation is on the special events. You can cover those events either in an archived format, which we're doing here, or in a live format. Within less than an hour, we'll be up, and we'll be about 30 minutes. We'll be on iHeart. Let me get the scores here out, and that is, of course, posted on Facebook, on Twitter, and various other things. And as time goes along, we'll be able to move much more effectively. I just see a little side note here. The Dodgers lose their fourth game in a row for the first time all season as the D-backs extend their streak. Nonetheless, Atlanta was in Philly, and the score was 9-1, Atlanta over the Phillies. Cleveland was in New York. Cleveland 2-1 over the Yankees. The Cardinals were in Milwaukee. The Brewers beat them 6-5. The Mariners were in Camden Yard. That's Baltimore. 8-7 the score, Orioles. The Tigers were in Denver. 6-2 Tigers over the Rockies. Atlanta, the second game in Philly. 5-2 Atlanta. The Marlins were in Washington and were shut out by the Nationals. Cleveland and the Yankees. Cleveland 9-4 in a second game. The Mariners and Astros in where I think they're in St. Petersburg. Anyway, 8-1 or maybe wherever they were. 8-1 was the score. Rangers. Yeah, St. Petersburg, Florida. They can't play in Houston. It's rain-soaked. The Red Sox and Blue Jays in Toronto. Sox 8-7. The Mets and Reds in Cincy. Mets shut out the Reds 2-0. The Pirates and Cubbies in a slugfest in Wrigley Field. 17-3 Cubs over the Pirates. Pirates had 6 hits, 2 errors, and the Cubbies 20 hits and no errors. Mr. Quintana was the winner. The White Sox and Twins in Minnesota. Twins 11-1. Twins had 16 hits, no errors, and the Sox 6 hits and 1 error. The Rays and Royals in Kansas City. Rays 5-3 in that contest. The Giants and Padres in San Diego. Padres 5-0. The Giants are still doing what they do best, lose. The Dodgers and D-backs in Arizona. D-backs 6-4. Dodgers, Mr. Injun Ryu was the losing pitcher there. And let's see the score thing here. 6 runs, 1 error for the Dodgers, and 11 hits, no errors for the D-backs. And finally, the Athletics in Los Angeles. Angels 10-8 in that contest. So that does it for baseball and for the State of Podcast 2017 WBRN Radio. This will do it for us. The takeaway here is podcasting is becoming a much more popular / internet radio. And the reason we use internet radio, the way we see the trend line, it will be going to the iHeart type radio stations that are already established out there because they are able to use the apps. And if you live in Los Angeles, you live in New York, the Motor City or whatever, you can use the iHeart or various other radio stations apps to go to your local station. You can still find the podcast. So the podcast will be there, whether you want to quibble and call it podcast radio. Podcast is an advertiser's term, but it's becoming much more than someone sitting in a bathtub or wherever, running just a stream of consciousness. A lot of this is obviously people do a lot of research. They look things up. They find the Mr. Waynes of the world, and he found the information over, I think, at allaccess.com or whatever that is, a site for professional broadcasters. So we found something there. There's a lot of information, incidentally, out there that you can find. In other matters, the Hurricane Harvey has departed the Houston area, more or less. The rains are starting to lessen, and it went on to Louisiana. Now it's in the ballpark of the Congress to get the money to Houston and the affected areas. And the big debate there is a debate between conservatives and progressives / liberals. The middle, everybody else. Will they extend flood insurance? Flood insurance is a government program, incidentally, that people buy in the Houston area. I think it was $500 to $1,000. Some couldn't afford the $1,000. That's an add-on. The Trump operation would like to extend that to private insurance companies. They would charge more, and less people would have the coverage. In 2011, in an industrialized capital let's type country. Government insurance is the way to go, because the private insurers on a major catastrophe couldn't handle it. Go to the reinsurance people. They would go back to the government. And part of the reason is, in Houston, we'll get to that, a big problem is the climate. They were warned about it. They were not ready, and now they suffered the consequences of the largest episode in the history of Texas, and some would say larger than Katrina. Not as many deaths, obviously, because they were a little better prepared, which in New Orleans, Katrina was like a third world country. And if you notice from typhoons or whatever that are out there, hurricanes, tornadic activity, etc., earthquakes, in developing countries or countries that don't have the financial wherewithal, more deaths are there from floods. Thousands of people die because they're in low-lying areas, etc. So, in other words, the way to keep the playing field even is to do that. Now, the Republicans, many of those people from Texas that voted down Sandy, are faced with coming with their hat in hand. DJ Trump went there, and effectively he renamed the Hurricane DJ Trump, no longer Harvey. He took the center stage, announced to the people that the ratings were up for the hurricane coverage. Therefore, he was going to be the hurricane coverage. He did not talk about the lives lost, etc., in the hurricane. Then he went on to Missouri to talk about adjusting the tax levels on corporations on the 1%. That is his situation now. The tax cut. They're not saying so much about tax reform anymore, and the Republicans could use the same method, reconciliation, to pass it with their 51 votes, if they can find them, and that would be that. The Democrats would be on the sideline, but they would take the beating. So this is one of the things that we see. Let me just very quickly here do the poll here from Real Clear Politics. We do this. We haven't been here in a while. Incidentally, join us for Friday Jobber on a Friday morning. This is obviously Thursday morning. And we'll be here with that. The week that was. That's our political program over the weekend. And a numbers man will be here. Some new numbers out there revised up for Q2. Looked a little bit better. Nonetheless, at Fox News, these are the approval readings of one DJ Trump. He's at 41 at Gallup. He's at 35 at Rasmussen. He's at 40 at Reuters. He's at 37. Dropped a little bit there. YouGov. He's at 40. And let's see. I won't be bothered with a congressional approval rating at YouGov. I guess this is called generic ballot. Democrats ahead by 8, 40 to 32. Don't pay much attention, a little early on that one. The public approval of Obamacare, 49% approve of it and 48% disapprove. This from Fox News. And on this is on Wednesday, and on Tuesday, we from Pew Research, the approval rating of one DJ Trump is at 36%. And from Harper, we hadn't reported this, Roy Moore at 47%. He's in the line of here. Anyway, Luther Strangelove at 45%, margin of error we call it. So that is from Harper, the Republican House there. We'll see that race tightening up down there between the judge and Big Luther. This will do it for us. Good day.